There are some who argue that our military actions in Iraq and Syria have diminished the threat to the homeland. I think, Director Rasmussen, you touched upon this. However, the CIA Director John Brennan just recently, in his testimony, gave the administration a failing grade in the fight against ISIS and said, quote, "Our efforts have not reduced the group's terrorism capability and global reach." I want to ask this question to each of you, starting with Secretary Johnson. Do you agree with the CIA Director's comments?
I haven't read Director Brennan's testimony in its entirety. I've seen excerpts of it. The way I would assess it is we are making significant progress in ISIL's ability to maintain any type of caliphate in Iraq and Syria. I think any time a terrorist organization, from the Homeland Security perspective, is able to establish a caliphate, that has real implications and troubling implications. We have made progress there in our ability to roll back their territory, degrade their ability to finance, degrade their ability to communicate. I agree with Nick's assessment, however, that ISIL's ability to conduct external attacks, to inspire, to self-radicalize, is still very much present. And that is something that we need to continue to focus our U.S. government, national security, homeland security resources on. In no respect, I think, are we satisfied that their ability to engage in external attacks and self-radicalize actors and inspire actors has been diminished to the point where we can step back and take a breather. We have to stay focused on that very much so.
Thank you. Director Comey.
I agree with what Director Brennan said. The intelligence community assesses that as the caliphate is crushed, the so-called Islamic State will become more desperate to demonstrate its continued vitality, and that will likely take the form of more asymmetric attacks, more efforts at terrorism. So I agree with Secretary Johnson. It's necessary to crush the caliphate, but we can't take our eye off what the next move will be by these killers.
And Director Rasmussen.
I guess the way I would think about it, Mr. Chairman, is that one shouldn't necessarily expect that there's a one-for-one correlation between progress on the ground in Iraq and Syria, which is undeniable and is essential to our long-term effort to crush ISIL or to defeat ISIL. But one shouldn't expect a one-for-one correlation between that effort and the results we're seeing on that front and near-term shrinkage of this external operations capability that the group has invested in over time. So I would consider that as something that's going to lag. Our success in this area is going to take longer and require more effort.
The next question. We have been long worried about ISIS internet directives to kill both military and police officers in this country. After Dallas and the tragic events there, I was born and raised in that city. We now see a new threat to law enforcement from another direction that I see. This I am concerned about from fringe groups out there, and I direct this to Secretary Johnson and Director Comey. As we look at the upcoming Republican convention, and I will be attending on Monday, can you comment on the threat from these fringe groups? I know some have directed people to come to Cleveland and bring your weapons. Obviously, there's great concern in the American people of the status of security at that convention. Secretary Johnson, can you comment on that?
Well, I am concerned about the prospect of demonstrations getting out of hand. I am concerned about the possibility of violence. We have within DHS some 3,000 personnel that will be dedicated to the security of the Republican National Convention and the Democratic National Convention, each consisting of Secret Service, TSA, Homeland Security Investigations, Customs Border Protection, NPPD, Coast Guard. I know that there will be at least another 1,000 or so U.S. government personnel and hand in both places, number in Cleveland of the Ohio Guard, as well as probably thousands in terms of state and local law enforcement. We have been planning and preparing for both conventions now for over a year. As I mentioned earlier, I plan to inspect the security at both sites, Cleveland tomorrow, Philadelphia next Friday. So I think we have to be concerned about things getting out of hand, very definitely, but there will be a lot of security and a lot of preparation in place. There's a certain level of First Amendment protected activity that is guaranteed to demonstrators at national political conventions. That will be confined. It will be roped off in an isolated area. But it's something that will have a lot of security devoted to, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Director Comey, to the extent you can, in an open setting, can you talk about the nature of the threat streams you see out there to this convention?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the definition of domestic terrorism is someone who engages in acts of violence directed against other people in order to coerce a civilian population or try and coerce a government. And so anytime there's a national spotlight on a political event in the United States, there's a risk that groups that aspire to do just that, to engage in acts of domestic terrorism, will be attracted. It's a threat we're watching very, very carefully. It's the reason we have hundreds of people focused on intelligence and deployed to Cleveland. I don't want to talk about particular groups here, but there is a concern anytime there's an event like this that people from across a spectrum of radical groups will be attracted to it. So we're watching it very, very carefully.
Thank you. Last question. I want to ask you about the national security implications of Secretary Clinton's private server. You stated that she used personal emails extensively while outside the United States, including sending and receiving work-related emails in the territory of sophisticated adversaries. And given that, you assessed it's possible that actors gain access to your personal email account. I know when we travel overseas, we're told not to bring these devices into nations with foreign adversaries. You went on to say that 7 of her email chains concern matters classified at top secret, but also special access programs that were sent and received. Those programs were designed in part to protect the country's most highly classified and sensitive information. Can you tell us if her private server, if these emails were breached, what would be the national security implications to that, and could American lives be at risk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was hoping to talk about terrorism, but I'll do my best to address this in an open setting. As I've said publicly, I don't know. We don't have direct evidence that the server was successfully hacked. We wouldn't, though, expect to see that evidence from sophisticated adversaries, given the nature of the adversary and given the nature of the system. The definition of classified information is it's information that an intelligence agency assesses the improper release of which would cause some damage to the United States. I can't answer the question beyond that without going into the specifics of the emails, which I can't do in an open setting.
And I know we can't talk about what special access programs were on these emails in the server. You and I know how sensitive they are. I hope and pray that they were not compromised. With that, the chair recognizes the ranking